And aloha, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this Wednesday for the COVID-19 Care Conversation here on the platform of the Honolulu Star Advertiser. Thank you so much for joining us. Good morning, I'm Yanji Denise.
And I'm Ryan Kalesiji. We want to thank you all for tuning in. We again are here every single weekday, bringing you sort of the updates of what's happening around this COVID-19 pandemic, connecting you with some of our local and leaders, and an opportunity to engage with you, the public. So we want to thank, of course, our sponsors with the Hawaii Executive Collaborative to bring you this conversation. They are a collective of Hawaii business and civic leaders helping to make this conversation possible, and really coming together to help to educate all the public and get you connected with some of the information you need, because we know that there's a lot of people struggling right now. But as we continue to see that curve in Hawaii flattening with another day of single-digit new cases.
Yeah, that was wonderful to see. Just 2 new cases reported yesterday for a total of 609 positive cases in the island since this pandemic began. 16 deaths total so far since it began as well. No new deaths since Monday. A total of 505 patients have recovered. That means 83% of the people who have been infected with the virus here in Hawaii have recovered, and that is so wonderful to see.
Yeah, great numbers to hear. Of course, there are two fronts of this. Of course, the physical side of the impact that this has, but also to the economy. And someone that's going to be joining us in a few moments is Congressman Ed Case to talk about some of the efforts that's being made on the federal level to support local businesses, small businesses here, because we know that there are a lot of people suffering still economically, with a lot of people out of work. So we want to encourage you, if you have a question for Congressman Case, please insert your comments into the comment section of the paper of this broadcast, and we'll try to get as many questions as we can.
Yeah, we know a lot of you participated in the discussion yesterday with Scott Murakami, some new headlines about unemployment and the efforts there. The more fixes coming to the system very soon, from what we understand. Hawaii is obviously overburdened. There are so many claims having been filed. 153,000, give or take, have not been paid since they've been filed. Those are eligible claims. So they are quadrupling the number of people who are answering the phones from 30 to 120, and they're really trying to enhance the mainframe there, trying to make the system actually work for people so that they can get that money. We know that so many people are frustrated. A lot of people who are also frustrated are the business owners, those people that those unemployed workers used to work for. They have been applying for federal money through the PPP program, trying to get some small business administration loans. And here to talk to us this morning is Congressman Ed Case. He is fighting for Hawaii, and we so appreciate him being with us this morning. Good morning, Congressman. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me on.
So we know that the latest round of PPP funding was released on Monday. One of the big concerns with that, of course, was that the larger banks were able to bundle applications in groups of 15,000, as we understand. And if I say anything and I'm incorrect, please do correct me. My understanding is that it's 15,000 groups of 15,000. So the large banks on the mainland were really able to gobble up some of that money pretty quickly. What's your understanding in terms of how Hawaii businesses are faring in terms of getting their fair share?
Well, this is the second round of PPP funding. This is assistance from our federal government through the Small Business Administration to our small businesses. And of course, here in Hawaii, virtually all of our businesses are small businesses of one kind or another, as defined by the federal government, 500 or less. But the average number of employees per small business in Hawaii is quite low. It's about 12. And so we in the congressional delegation have been very, very concerned that we are able to compete fairly and equitably and get the assistance to our small businesses here in Hawaii who are in desperate need of this, just the same as anywhere else in the country. We did very, very well relatively on the first go around. That was the first $350 billion for this program that was in our CARES Act, one that was passed about a month ago. That was exhausted inside of 2 weeks. Through a lot of good work by a lot of folks here, we got about 11,000 loans processed for about $2 billion worth of aid to our small businesses. And that is actually coming to Hawaii as we speak. We're now into round two, another $310 billion. Tremendous demand across the country. As you pointed out, that program opened up very early Monday morning, and we have been very, very concerned with the ability of our Hawaii small businesses and financial institutions to access that small business funding again equally for many, many different reasons. The concern was it's just been a really high level of concern. Yesterday, and I've really been spending virtually all of my time on making sure that PPP program is working for Hawaii in the last couple of days. Yesterday, Senator Schatz and I got on a phone personally with the head of the Small Business Administration, the administrator, and her staff to relay our personal concerns for Hawaii on a number of fronts. And good news on that front is that the batching that you were talking about, where the larger businesses batched 15 and banks batched 15,000 applications at a time, they suspended that because yesterday at noon, because they felt, as we told them, that it was crowding out small businesses that were forced to apply individually throughout the country. They also gave us other bits of good news that Hawaii is actually making some pretty steady progress in this area. I think yesterday we already had yesterday morning. I think it was 1,500 plus applications approved. So we're on a pretty good trajectory. But again, the real challenge here is not so much the pace of the application, but the demand throughout the country, and that money is finite. At least for now, we might always renew it all over again, but it's really, really critical for us to continue the advocacy in Washington. Today, all four members of the delegation sent a joint letter to both Secretary Mnuchin of the Treasury and again the SBA administrator to cite very specific Hawaii challenges to accessing small business, and we're literally tracking it hourly to make sure that those applications are open, that our banks and credit unions can get in. Another encouraging thing that Secretary Mnuchin did this morning, I was on a phone call through my appropriations committee with him this morning. They felt that the folks that were especially getting crowded out were the banks with the very small banks and community financial institutions with net assets of $1 billion or less, which is actually a pretty small one. And so what they did was they actually restricted everybody else for some period of time to apply to give those smaller institutions a chance to have exclusive access. That's actually going on right now. It's just for today. And we got the word on that to our institutions here who fit into that category. So we're trying every trick in the book to maximize the amount that is coming to our Hawaii small businesses. It's an hourly effort. I think it's paying off. But we really won't know until we get down a week or so as to whether we actually were able to access very fairly and equitably across the board.
What happens? I mean, because there's no doubt that this money will also run out. Can we potentially see another round of support for those businesses? Because those who are passed in that, who maybe qualify for that first round of PPP, that gets them to the end of June. A lot of these businesses are saying, okay, then what? Because we might likely still be closed and unable to meet those sort of margins that they need. Could we see another round come out then?
Yes, we could. And as a matter of fact, as we speak, we in Congress are working on what we call CARES 2, which is to go back to the CARES package, which included the small business relief, and go for a third round of funding. The demand is so great, as you point out. That's not a whole bunch of time for small businesses to try to get back on their feet. Obviously, we need for them to be able to conduct business again. Otherwise, they'll have no sources of revenue. And we're trying very, very hard to do exactly what these bills are trying to do, which is to tide people through the real crisis point, both public health wise and economically, so that they can get back on their feet. This impacts some of our businesses, especially, for example, I've been talking with our restaurant industry, which is a critical part of our local economy, and the tourism industry in general also. And the problem there is if you're asking them to commit that money, even if they get it, to employee protection for 8 weeks and then expect them at the end of June to be back on their feet, social distancing restricts that to start with. And so I think we are definitely actively considering in Congress right now CARES 2, which would supplement small business again. And I hope extend that deadline. We also talked with Secretary Mnuchin this morning about that on our Appropriations Committee. So that's just one aspect of what we're working on right now. In CARES, in addition to small business, was of course the direct rebate payments to many Americans, and that's coming through a little slower than any of us wanted. But I estimate that about half of the folks in Hawaii now have those payments. Of course, unemployment insurance, that's been such an incredible challenge here in Hawaii. The federal supplementation is available right now. People are starting to get their plus up of 600 a week through the federal program. And then state and local governments, critical. We have already received here in Hawaii for the state and for the city and county of Honolulu $1.25 billion in direct assistance that they can access for a great variety of purposes. And both the state and the city and county are trying to figure out right now how best to spend that money. I think that will be supplemented also in our next CARES bill. And then finally, we're trying to help our hospitals and healthcare providers across our state and country. We funded them to about $100 billion in our first CARES bill, and we just went another $75 billion to them. And over and above that, added 25. Sorry about that. I've got a delivery guy coming.
Well, that's real life. I want to touch back on something that you just said, talking about the state budgets. You know, we had the governor on here on Monday. Our understanding is that the money that comes from the federal government really can't be used to fund existing expenses. So those are things that were on the budget, before March 1st, I believe is when that time frame starts. So, we have Mitch McConnell suggesting that some states may actually go the route of bankruptcy. How do you see this sort of playing out with the federal government in terms of helping state budgets like ours? We're looking at a shortfall of, I believe it's around $1.5 billion. If we have no tax base because a third of our people aren't working, how do we navigate that, and how can the federal government help?
Well, two answers to you on that. The first answer is that 1.25 billion is actually available for quite a few range of state government and county government activities and needs. As long as you can demonstrate that the expenditure was forced as a result of COVID-19, you can spend that money, and I think that the state government is actively planning for expenditures of the 800 and some odd million dollars that it received. And I know that the county government, city and county, is doing the same. So, whether it goes into this bucket or that bucket, it's still money into the overall state budget that if it's allocated to some permissible purposes, it frees up some money possibly to go to other areas where it's not permissible, number one. Number two, in our upcoming CARES 2, which we're working on right now, there is no question whatsoever that front of mind for all of us is to create some more flexibility so that those monies can in fact be used to compensate for revenue shortfalls in previously budgeted areas. After all, the reason we have these revenue shortfalls is because of COVID-19. So the distinction of revenue shortfall in previously budgeted versus affirmative, obvious COVID-related, such as mobilizing the National Guard. I mean, it's kind of a meaningless distinction at that point. I hope that Mitch McConnell's perspective on this does not prevail. I think he's wrong. And I think, moreover, that he's got many, many Republican members of Congress who are in exactly the same boat back in their states and their counties. So I'm hopeful that in our next CARES 2 package, which is going to be another huge package to, again, help our country and our state through, that not only is that aid increase to state and counties, but they have the full range of flexibility to use that, and that'll help our state and county budget.
Another question I wanted to address is a question that actually came in a few days ago, and it was really concerning about just overall mortgage payments and people having a hard time both on the residential side and also businesses. So we've heard from small businesses who said that their landlords are saying, we're going to give you 3 months of rent free because they understand that you're not able to work, but expecting that 3 months of payment on the 4th month along with that month as well. So essentially 4 months of payment at one time. Is there anything that the federal government can do to maybe put a hold on some of these mortgage payments and put them on the back end of the loan to work with these agreements, so a lot of these businesses aren't forced to have to pay, you pay all this money that they may be getting in from the government just to go to pay and cover rent.
It's a really good point, and it's a major concern that comes into my office all the time. First of all, we have already done something about that. We actually required in our bills that we've passed to date actual suspension of both rental payments and mortgage payments for mortgages and rental properties that have a federal connection, are federally backed, whether it's supported by the federal mortgage protection programs or funded through federal housing requirements. And that's actually a lot of the rental and mortgages in Hawaii and elsewhere in the country. Now that's at present a forbearance, not a waiver. It's a forbearance. And so that does again beg the question of what if they just slide it for a couple of months and then ask for it in lump sum? First of all, I think personally that would be wrong to lump it into anybody right there at the end of the forbearance periods. Number two, as I recall, and I've had these discussions with our local banks very, very directly, they are generally rolling the foreign mortgage payments to the backside of the loan. So in other words, you don't owe it in a lump sum. They try to find a way to ease that over time. And I think many of the responsible lending institutions are doing the right thing along those lines. And then the final thing I would say on this is that if I was a renter and my landlord was saying that, first of all, are you connected with the federal government at all? Are you federal housing? Because you're not supposed to be doing that. And number two, I think we also have to realize that it's a chain reaction up the chain. I mean, many of these landlords have a mortgage, right? So in other words, if the landlord has gotten forbearance from their lender on their mortgage payments, pretty tough for the landlord to turn around and enforce a rent on the renter. So if I was a renter, I would say to the landlord, well, did you get a break on your side because you got a paycheck protection loan or a forbearance from your lender? I think those are legitimate questions for renters to ask. And then finally, what I would say is it is a complicated it's a very complicated area, and it's critical to many families. And I think it's going to take a little more action at the federal level, which we are actively deliberating right now. What more relief do we give to renters and mortgagees? But there's a state component to this as well. The state has remedies that it can impose, and as you saw, Governor Ige did some of that by prohibiting any residential evictions, which I think was the right move. But we're going to have to sort through this over time. It's going to be difficult to unwind and get put back in the right way that kind of takes care of everybody's legitimate concerns and needs.
I want to make sure we bring in the audience, and there are a number of questions here. Kelly Vitorino says, the best idea to help us on rent and mortgage payments for us is to reopen the state now. We see a lot of push, not just here in Hawaii, but around the country. There's different groups who have different opinions on how fast we should get back to business. The president just announcing today that he is not going to extend the federal stay-at-home I don't know if you'd call it an order, but the suggestion that we all stay at home. But Governor Ige and Mayor Caldwell extending measures here in Hawaii till the 31st. What's your take on how soon things should open up and in what way?
I want things to reopen as fast as possible, as much as anybody in this country. The reality is that this is a public health epidemic and a crisis. And I think we have to apply a public health solution to it. And there's really no mystery about how you handle yourself going through a public health epidemic as we are right now. You need 5 stages. First of all, you need social distancing. The second is you need fully adequate and available testing so that people can determine whether they are in fact infected. Third, you need contact tracing to determine if the folks that came in contact with people that were tested are somehow in danger. Fourth, you need some form of containment of those folks so that the rest of the population can feel safe to engage again in a restaurant, in a bar, in a store. And then finally, you need completely adequate hospital capability and healthcare capability to handle it if it does get back out of control. And if we don't follow that pattern, if we don't walk ourselves systematically through that very deliberative process. The problem of opening up prematurely is not only do people get sick and die, but it damages your economy far more than had you deferred to get the public health side of it right to start with. So it's a very tough situation to be in. Here in Hawaii, the evidence is in. We've been one of the most successful in the entire across the entire country at really addressing the COVID-19 containment, and that has not been by accident. That's not some fluke of us being an island. We've done some pretty tough stuff here. But the consequence has been very severe to our economy, where we're one of the worst hit in the entire country. So what I think we have to do is, and I'm with respect to Kelly, I think it's very, very dangerous to open prematurely and we need to err on the side of caution here, because again, the consequence of not getting it right is going to be far worse than had we done it more deliberately. So I think they're on the right track. And what I can do during us getting through that right track at the federal level is to try as hard as I possibly can to ease the economic consequence and to bring people through that very deliberate period to where we can reasonably start to reopen.
We want to thank you for your time, and I know we're running out of time here. So just one maybe final thought. What would you suggest for those small business owners out there who are waiting for PPP, who haven't gotten word and maybe won't get in this round? Is there anything else that they can do? What other recommendations or advice that you would give from your level to those businesses that continue to struggle?
Well, I think I would say this. If you haven't applied already, go in and see your bank or your financial institution or your credit union right now. Yes, it's possible that you may not be able to get the assistance in this round. However, there were people that didn't get the assistance in the last round and came in and applied anyway, and they're now going to get the assistance. So that's the best thing that I can tell folks. If you don't have a relationship with a bank or a credit union, develop one right now. There are major resources out there to help answer your questions. To other assistance available, there are other programs and assistance available, federal and state and county for that matter levels. What we have is very good partners across the state, mainly affiliated with the Small Business Administration, such as the Small Business Development Centers, the Women's Business Development Centers, the Minority Business Development Centers, the Veterans Business Development Centers. These are pros that are available for this purpose, funded by the federal government to answer questions. And I think that they need to be accessed by anybody with questions. I'll leave you with this final thing, and that is that my office is open and completely available at all times to help anybody with your questions, with your needs. No request is too small. No question is not relevant. We are literally answering thousands of questions from folks, so access my office. My website is case.house.gov. Case.house.gov. There's a whole bunch of COVID-19 information there, and front page on that I think is the contact information for the development centers that I talked about. Also my contact information. So please contact us, whether it's COVID-19 or otherwise. I am actually doing the rest of my job also, which I would have been doing in any event had COVID-19 come along. And so there are many areas that we're helping folks with non-COVID-19 related stuff like Social Security benefits or veterans benefits. But we're here to serve, and I appreciate the opportunity to share some of the thoughts and to invite people to contact your congressman.
All right, Congressman Ed Case, thank you so much. We'll actually put your web address in our show notes so that people watching this back can actually get access to your website. And we're going to be on here for a month more, so we'd love to get you back in a few weeks and maybe get an update, hopefully on maybe what could be another round of PPP payments and more ways that we can help to continue to support our businesses here. So thank you so much, Congressman Ed Case, for joining us here this morning.
Come back on. Maybe I'll come to you from DC the next time.
There we go.
Thank you so much.
Aloha.
Okay, so you heard it there, case.house.gov, and we will, as Ryan said, put that in the show description so you can go there and access him. And those folks, of course, are there to help you, and it sounds like they are being very responsive, so we appreciate that. Interesting to hear him sounding that word of caution, saying that while other states may be willing to open up, he really is taking a cautious approach. Understanding how painful that is for small businesses and for individuals who have lost employment. And it sounds like, they're doing everything they can. Very interesting, the sort of maneuvers that they're doing, getting Secretary Mnuchin in there to try to halt the larger banks, hold them at bay for a little bit so that the smaller lending institutions like the credit unions here in Hawaii and what have you can actually get in there and access some of those funds. So that is really good to hear.
Yeah, encouraging to hear that they are making an effort to try to help support a lot of those smaller lenders and banks, especially like the ones that are right here in Hawaii, and him talking a little bit more in detail about just the mechanics and, as you said, the way that they have to sort of navigate through this. Again, 50 states all competing for the same amount of money. And so we know that they are trying all that they can to support our businesses. So happy to hear an update from that.
All other headlines in the paper today related to business. Mayor Caldwell saying that some low risk businesses may open as soon as Friday. Of course, because of the governor's new order, any kind of thing, any move like that has to be coordinated with the state. So the mayor kind of stepping out in front, saying that these are some of the areas that he wants to reopen. He talked about real estate, person-to-person real estate, not necessarily an open house, but by appointment, golf courses, car washes, automated services, things like that, where there'll be no interaction between, person-to-person interaction or limited person-to-person interaction. So as long as he gets the approval from the governor, we could see that as soon as Friday, which would be great to see, because the more, of course, businesses open in a safe way, the more people can actually start to get back to work and get those paychecks.
Yeah, and that's sort of a different context from what we have seen happen in the past, because in the past, counties were sort of making that determination on their own. The state's sort of pulling everybody back in, saying you have to sort of get approval before making these types of decisions. They're saying it's because they want to make sure that everyone's on the same page. So basically, Honolulu Mayor Kirk Caldwell waiting for approval for the state to sort of implement this next phase for the city and county of Honolulu. And again, we could see that sort of ripple out through all the different counties as they sort of want to open up, or reopen up, I should say, some of these businesses. One of those other businesses I know a lot of people are waiting for and trying to get access to would be things like the DMV and government agencies. The Honolulu County Department of Customer Service saying that there's no determination yet on when those reopenings will happen, because we know a lot of people are having expired licenses and need to update some of those important documents. And some of them are needed, in fact, to get some of these unemployment benefits. So they are closed right now, but looking at other ways that maybe they could bring that on online, basically, and provide other opportunities for people to get those services without actually physically having to be there and going into some of these facilities that we know can often congregate and gather a lot of people waiting in lines.
Yeah, that's a good point. You need a driver's license, a valid driver's license, or some kind of state ID to apply for these benefits in the first place. And if yours is expired, what on earth do you do? So we know that the city is trying to work on a way to actually maybe do something by appointment. They're still trying to figure that out. For now, everything is online. Another thing, probably a little less critical, but still what some people want to do, is hair salons and barbers. And that's the Star Advertiser's big question of the day. Should hair salons and barbers be among the first phase to reopen with social distancing? It's still hard for me to envision how you get a haircut with appropriate social distancing. I know that I've seen some Instagram images of, in Georgia, for instance, they did reopen their salons there, and you see some of them wearing those shields, those plastic guards and what have you. Of course, everyone wearing a mask. And right now in the lead on that poll on the website, they're saying, yes, people say they need a haircut and they want that open in early May. So we'll see how that goes. So let's go to our Hawaii hero.
That's right. Again, every day we like to highlight someone that's doing good in the community. These just died. That's awesome. We like to highlight some good that's happening in our community. And one of the organizations, of course, that has continued to come to the forefront of helping our community is Everyone Hawaii. And this time they've actually partnered with Zippy. So, with many restaurants and cafeterias closed because of the pandemic, a lot of these frontline workers maybe don't have the access to some of the food that they would during their times or their shifts at the hospital. And so Everyone Hawaii, along with Zippy's, have come together to deliver meals. For the next month, 100 bentos will be packed every weekday and delivered to the frontline workers at various hospitals around the island every single night. So Zippies and everyone in Hawaii coming together to find a way to support our frontline workers with bentos. And who doesn't love a Zippies bento, right? Especially
And so we mahalo them for doing that. Oh, I'm getting a little feedback. Maybe it's your AirPods. Okay. We say thank you to them. And if you have somebody that you'd like to nominate for the Hawaii Hero of the Day, please do let us know. One thing that we wanted to clarify, and I'm still getting that. I don't know if you could put those earbuds in your pocket, perhaps. One thing that we also wanted to highlight is the difference between Hawaii Fights COVID and Aloha Trace. This is something really important that we wanted to show to you. We've been talking about contact tracing and how important it is. These look like two different organizations. They are, but they are actually part of the same group. The surveys are being conducted by the National Disaster Preparedness Training Center at UH and the Pacific Urban Resilience Lab. So we encourage you to take both surveys because they actually do different things. Hawaii Fights COVID is something that you just do one time, takes about 10 minutes. You only fill that out again if your symptoms or your situation health-wise changes. Aloha Trace, on the other hand, is about 2 minutes. You fill that out every day, and that's really to sort of see who you're coming into contact so they can have a broader view as to how the disease may be spreading. So just to clarify, Hawaii Fights COVID, you do it one time. Aloha Trace, you do it every day. And the more you folks can participate in these, the more we know where the virus is and how to stop it. We don't hear Ryan, so can't hear Ryan at all. Okay, we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you so much.